I'll just let. So welcome to the Tech Leader Chats. Our goal, as many of you know, with this community is to create a place where human-centric tech leaders can learn and grow together. And this is also a community where, at its heart, we care deeply about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this topic is very near and dear to our hearts because we want to be building tech that helps people and that doesn't harm people. My name is Lauren. I'm the CEO and founder of Multitudes. And as a company, our goal is also around making tech equitable and inclusive. So lots of reasons that we really care about this topic. Very briefly, the plan for today is that we'll start with hearing from Pedro. This part will be recorded, so he'll share some of the content he's prepared. We'll have time for a group Q&A at the end of that. And then at about that midway point, we'll then shift gears, we'll turn off the recording, and then we'll give you some time to break out into a group discussion. And the goal of this is twofold. One, you can have maybe some more candid discussions than you can during the part where it's getting recorded, but also you can meet some other people who are leaders like you who care about this and are wanting to grow and improve in this area. Along the way, you can put your questions in the chat. James will be monitoring that. He'll batch them at the end and we'll ask those to Pedro. And that's how the session will work. So diving in then, I wanted to share a little bit about how I met Pedro. And interestingly, I actually met him when he joined our Tech Leader Chat Slack community. And in the little intro, he mentioned that his job title was leading the inclusive AI team. And so that immediately caught my interest and it kicked off a Slack conversation, which turned into a face-to-face conversation. And it was all just so interesting and frankly, so relevant, especially for this period that we're going through now with the explosion of AI. That we had to have Pedro come and speak to this community. So really, really excited that he's going to be sharing. As you can see, he's the manager of the ML engineering team on the inclusive AI team at Pinterest. And he is passionate about bridging the gap between theory and practice for machine learning applications and also holds an unwavering commitment to ethical AI development. And I've seen that in practice. He has a really strong focus on who is it that might be negatively affected by this thing that we're building. And I know in tech, it's so easy for us to get excited about the cool applications. So we need those people to remind us to pause and reflect. And also I'll say this because I don't know if Pedro would say this about himself, but he's the person, it sounds like, that people at Pinterest go to for tips on how to use AI responsibly. And so we're so lucky that he's sharing his time and his insights with us today. And with that, I'm going to stop and hand it over to him. So thank you so much, Pedro, and I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Lauren. That's a very, very kind introduction. Give me 1 second here. Let me start sharing my screen. Cool. All right. Can you all see my screen? Fantastic. All right. So hi, everyone. If we haven't had the pleasure to meet yet, I'm Pedro. And like Lauren said, I lead the inclusive AI team at Pinterest, which is our kind way of saying the responsible AI team, right? We really look a lot into these topics. So before we go into the content of the conversation, I do have 2 disclaimers I need to say. The first one is that all the views expressed in this talk are my own as a long-time, learner and practitioner in the field of responsible AI, but they're not necessarily representative of Pinterest views or opinions. So I'm here at my personal capacity. I just want to make that clear. The second disclaimer is that on this talk, it may include content of offensive nature with respect to gender, sex, religion, nationality, race, class, and socioeconomic status. And the point of that is basically to make sure we can see a little bit of the type of problems that can come out of this. I will give a warning. It's basically 1 slide, but I want to make sure that this is set up front. And I want to also say, please prioritize your mental health and disconnect if the content is beyond what you can tolerate. That's perfectly fine. But I want to just make sure I can say that up front. Without that out of the way, let's get into the fun part here, right? So when I spoke to Lauren and James, we were talking a little bit about how to approach this, and they really wanted me to talk through the topic of how to safely and responsibly use AI, right? And I was like, that's going to be very challenging. So I decided to make this a little bit more self-contained, and I was like, why don't we make this relevant to what's happening over the last few months? And let's just talk about Gen AI, right? I think one of the awesome things that we've seen with Gen AI is how easy it is to bootstrap and build things really quickly and put it out there. which is amazing. Like as I know that a lot of you work in the startup space, and velocity is key, right? We really want to build products really quickly, get it out there, proof of concept, all of this kind of those, right? So I want to talk, basically the content of the talk is going to be around Gen AI. And when I say Gen AI here, I'm saying broad terms. I'm talking about all the different modalities, right? So the first thing I wanna go into is like what kind of Gen AI do we have it out there? And it's all kind of flavors, right? You have, of course, text to text, that's your ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, Claude from Anthropic. You have text to image, that's going to be Stable Diffusion, Dolly. You have new GPT versions doing that right now. Text to video, there's going to be OpenAI Sora. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend. Sora is absolutely amazing. You have some of the other tools like Stable Video Diffusion. Those are not that great, but they've been out there for some time. But this is not limited to this, right? You have way more. You have text to audio, image to text, and basically all of those come into like multimodality, right? So the systems that are being built today, they're the type of systems that they can take an image plus a description plus a prompt, and they can output something else of different modalities, right? And I think the question, I probably don't need to even go into this, but like, why should I use this, right? And there's a lot of potential good things that can come out of this, like scaling up, like for example, scaling up support, summarization, code assistant, right? An actual assistant for handling calendars and all of these kind of things. In the image and video space, for example, if you're a small company, this can really scale up how you do like stock imagery for products or videos and things like that. Also, just making your pictures look better. I think Adobe Photoshop has been making really good use of these tools for on their product, for example, and even like evaluating some of these problems, right? Like how do we evaluate image quality? There's a lot of good usage for this. So that's a positive piece of it, but there's also a lot of bad things that can come out of it. And this is the warning for the next slide that's going to contain a few pictures that may be offensive to some folks. But it's basically the heart of this conversation. Like why should we care about responsibility in this space, right? I think maybe I'm preaching to the choir to this group, but I think it's still valuable for us to have that understanding, right? So this is just one paper of probably 50 that have come out over the last 2 years or so about like, here's a lot of bad things that come out of these models, right? So for example, on the top left here, I have this is basically the prompt and what the image generator generated, right? So when you say like an attractive person, it's all fair-skinned people, blue-eyed folks, right? So it's like, and there you have this concept that has to be associated with being attractive. Similarly, a poor person, it's always black and dark-skinned people, right? And even if you go at the middle one at the bottom here, a poor white person is still generating black people, right? So you can see how you have this bias baked into the models. Another really bad example, for example, if you say a house, that looks like a typical Western American kind of house style, right? So like you're not even encompassing other cultures, like even Europe and other places are very different. But as soon as you see an African house, you see things that look like a lot more like broken down, poor hut kind of style. So that already has a lot of these things baked in. And this is again just image generation, which is one of the ones that have really gotten a lot of usage before. There are the problems here, like as soon as you say, for example, on this paper specifically, they also look at gender, right? Which is the one here in the middle. If you say, give me an image of a software engineer, it was like 99% white men, right? So what does that mean? It's the same for like, I think pilots as well was the same thing. But as soon as you say a housekeeper, it's the reverse. A lot of them are people of color, and most of them are going to be women, or at least people that have feminine traits. So this is the kind of problems that we're trying to avoid. Like I think all of you here, you would not like to have an application or anything you build associated with this type of issue, right? So this is in the image space. On the text space, it's not really that different. Like there's probably been like 50 or different more news per week about things that have been wrong in the OpenAI generated this and ChatGPT said that, right? Oh, just today I saw one that the Llama 2 model was saying that it has a child with disabilities, and it's like, what are you saying? What in Black Mirror world am I reading, right? But just a few of the problems here that you can encounter, right? Discrimination, hate speech, and exclusion. This is usually associated when you go into languages in countries beyond the US and English, right? A lot of these models do support multi-language out of the box, right? So like you can actually maybe run into this experience in India or Brazil, and they seem to work just fine, but they have a lot lower security in terms of bias and generating this type of content. So just be mindful of that. Information hazards, this has become a big problem as well. You know, a lot of applications, they feed user data into the model in the prompt part, probably, to be able to generate useful things. But then if you prompt the model enough, the model can actually reveal some of that information that you shouldn't have, right? So that is something to keep in mind. Misinformation harms, you know, hallucinations has become a big deal. Like the model is literally creating things, right? At the end of the day, none of this is magic. This is just machine learning, right? So these are very fancy autocomplete models, right? So it can actually generate things that are not truthful because that's what makes the most sense, right? So it tends to have that bias towards the majority. And it also leads to like poor quality of information and misleading information. Malicious uses, there are currently a few of these models available in the dark web for creating malware and creating like potential attacks. So in a different lifetime, I have worked in the cybersecurity space, and it has become really hot because now the amount of new malware that's coming out of this is really, really high. And also the amount of social attacks that can be done with this, right? Literally, if you get a recording, like if you get this recording in my voice in like 5 seconds, you can generate any kind of audio that's my voice speaking. And my wife cannot differentiate it because it really reproduces very well nowadays. So a lot of malicious usage, environmental and socioeconomic harms. It is no secret that only a handful of companies in the world can actually train these models because it really takes a lot of money. And that money is being spent in like buying these chips, but also like, you know, the creative economics is being affected here. So you have environmental impacts because that's generating a lot of heat, that's contributing to harms to the environment. And it's also creating like a side economy that, you know, a lot of the creative economy is being affected because now instead of hiring someone to do a drawing or take a photo shoot, I can just generate this on a model. So just some things to call out there. Now, okay, that's very scary. What can we do about that, right? So when you're trying to build a product, I think often we start with the vision of like, this is what I want my product to be. This is my idea. But as soon as you inject AI into the fold, especially generative AI, one of the most important things to have is principles, right? And this is something I really encourage all of you to do it before you add any of these tools. Like, what are your principles in the guidelines you want these tools or anyone that comes to your company that's going to be leading to this type of things to abide by? And I just have a few here that, you know, you're probably going to see this. If you look for principles, pillars, guidelines in any of these big tech companies, you're going to find that on their website. Does not mean they follow all of them, but you should, right? Because again, I think we are trying to avoid this type of problems. They often going to encompass these four things here. Fairness, like what does it mean? Like fairness in machine learning, it's a very hot topic. Even like what is fairness? Like what am I talking about? Usually here we're talking about group fairness, meaning you don't want different groups to be affected and to be treated differently, right? And that just like something simple as men and women or people that live in country A versus country B or people with disabilities. So you can always think about how can I look at different groups and try to understand how they're being impacted by this tool that I'm trying to put it out there. Privacy, again, going back into what I was saying about data leaks through these models, right? There are a lot of attacks nowadays to kind of get information from the models that you maybe provided in the prompt or in the data part of it. So there's a lot of questions into like, how can we protect that data to begin with? And when is the time to pull the plug on these applications if anything comes to light? Thirdly, which I think is extremely important, transparency, right? I think there's nothing worse than having that feeling that, oh, I've been duped, right? Someone took advantage of me. So if you're planning on using any of these tools, you should be upfront, right? If you're generating images with generative AI, be upfront about it. Like, hey, this image was generated with AI. And this helps you create trust with your users, right? It really doesn't matter the type of application that I'm talking about here. Like, we need to have that level of trust. Like, a lot of people use this now for support, and they really try to pretend that you're talking to a human, something like that, which is like, it's bad. Like, it's really bad. It's much better to be like, hey, I have this first layer here, but if anything happens, you go and actually talk to a human. And lastly, accountability, right? You have the ultimate control over things. So don't just be blaming like, oh yeah, that was the AI that I used, that was the system that I used. Like, who's making those calls, right? Someone should be accountable. So keep that in mind. With that being said, now we get into the problem of, okay, maybe I should use it. I don't know if I want to use it, but how can I actually do it, right? And I think there is a lot of work into getting these really big models, which we call them like foundational models, right? So that's like your Llama model, your ChatGPT, your GPT, whatever version, GPT-3, GPT-4, and actually making them useful to your applications, right? To your company, to whatever task you want to do it. There's a few different ways to do it. I listed 3 here, which are the most popular, right? Full fine tuning. That means you literally downloading the huge model. You need to load it into memory and you training it further with your own data. Um, it's really fun to do it, but you can think that it's also, again, very computationally costly, and it's also going to take a lot of memory, and of course it takes a lot of expertise knowledge, right? In a similar tone, you can also do what we call, it's called PEFT, parameter efficient fine tuning. This one takes a little bit less time, but it still requires that knowledge, right? You need to have someone. This is someone that is like probably has a lot of understanding of machine learning, how to set this up. Do I need to talk to AWS? Now things really got out of proportion, right? And probably the third one here, which a lot of people don't think have a ton of power, but actually has, is prompt engineering, right? This is something any of you can do, which is literally like being very specific about what you want out of this model. And this is where, again, your principles might come in handy, right? Those principles can be part of how you determine how you write a prompt and can be part of the instructions for this model. Be very specific on what you want, right? Sometimes we just like evaluate this data set. Like, what does that mean? Even if you say that to a human, it's like, what do you mean evaluate this data set? Be specific, like evaluate this data set, breaking down, generate charts with a certain manner. I want to understand ABC, give me a summary in 2 paragraphs, like things like that. Like, the more specific you are, the better your outcomes are going to be. And one of the things to keep in mind is that a lot of these models, as they have been evolving, they have been becoming very powerful on keeping context, right? We call it the context window. Some of the latest models that have been coming out, they have context windows up to like 256,000 words. That's like several books. Like, you can literally fit all of that information, and the models are still useful in the outputs. And iterate as needed. Like, things don't have to be frozen in time. If you're trying something out, you're trying to evolve it, and after some time it's not giving the output you want it, keep evolving on that prompt, right? And then we're gonna get into probably the most important part of all of this, which is the part that I put a lot of time in usually when I'm working on these things, which is evaluation, right? Really, like, evaluate like your life depends on it, because oftentimes your company life might depend on this if things go wrong, right? So I just have a few different ways where, when we look at evaluating generative AI experiences, how we go about that. So first one is context dependency, right? The biggest risk in these experiences is when they have open-ended inputs and outputs, right? Meaning, literally, you open up a prompt so the user can type anything they wanted. Maybe instead of having a prompt, you can literally have just a checkbox where users are selecting something that you already determined that's going to be anything, all the information you need from them. Same thing for the output, right? That can be part of your prompt, saying like, hey, the output I wanted has to be one of these options, A, B, C, D, E, and that's it. So you limiting your risk by limiting the input and output. The second thing I have here is online versus offline use cases. So offline is, when I say online here, I'm referring on generating things in real time. That means literally you have a model that the users will give an input and that's going to be generated in real time. You have a lot less control about that because you just don't know what the model is gonna put it out. But if in your specific application, you can generate things offline, it makes it much easier for you to test it out, try it against it, and make sure what you're putting out there is a little more safe. And it's also much cheaper. Generating things in real time is going to cost you a lot of money and often comes with like latency requirements. How long is that going to take? Some generations, depending on what kind of things or what kind of project you're doing, it may take between like 15 seconds and a minute. And if that's a real-time thing, what is your user going to be doing during that period, right? It might literally just drop. And going to more testing, Gen AI versus Gen AI, that's one of my favorite things to do, which is you can actually use a prompt to test the output of another model, right? So let's say you have a task, and my task is like, I want you to rank the pictures of these beautiful cats in order of prettiness. You can have a different model that basically takes that output. Say like, hey, this was what I asked for that model. This is the output it gave me. Give me a critique, right? So you literally pitting Gen AI against Gen AI here. That can be the same model, doesn't really matter. It's a different task, right? And that can help you find a lot of issues really early on. Number four, probably one of the most important here. So number three here, helps you automate a lot of this. You cannot remove people off the process, right? And red teaming is really fundamental for that. So red teaming is really, again, it came a little bit from the cybersecurity space when you had like pen testing. You had literally people trying to break your system, hack your security. This is the same way, but into the space, in the Gen AI space, where you literally try, like after you have built that experience, put yourself in the shoes of a malicious actor. How can someone try to break this experience and generate bad things? And just try it yourself. Try it with your team. This is not limited to specialists, to people that are ML engineers, right? This is like you can do it because maybe users will do it inadvertently. So you should just try it. Try to break experience, honestly. And number five here, humans in the loop, very fundamental. A lot of people, when they talk about this, they really just want to two-click things done. No one ever looks at this again. And then a few months later, things break. Maybe if you had someone trying to look and find problems more proactively at a certain cadence, people would have found stuff, right? That's, for example, the case that happened with Google Gemini, where they were generating Nazi pictures of African American people. That was a very simple thing to test, right? But like how often were they doing those tests? Probably not often enough. Performance. This is where, is it actually performing? Is it actually doing what you want it to do better than like a human would do or any other traditional machine learning system? People almost forget that like machine learning isn't that. It's not about Gen AI, it's not everything about Gen AI anymore. There's a lot of room for other tools too. Now, I am almost at time. I just want to close with some quick thoughts here. For better or for worse, the AI revolution is here. There's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube. I think what we have to do as technologists is make sure that when we're using these tools, we're giving it the thought it has to be given. We respecting it in a way, but we need to be responsible on how we use them, right? And that's my point number two, be responsible and accountable. Don't sacrifice quality over speed, ever. That is the quickest way for products to die, right? I want to really make sure that my thing is out there tomorrow, but if you're not checking for quality, it might just have that one chance and it might die earlier than it should have. Number three here, don't overfit on Gen AI. A lot of problems are actually going to be better solved using different tools and different AI tools even, right? Like literally 5 years ago, the talk of the ball was deep neural nets, right? And those still exist. They're still out there. They're still fantastic for a lot of tasks. There's so many different tools in the AI space that can be used for different tasks. So don't just use this hammer for everything. It is powerful. It is super fun to use it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm all in favor for it, but just be mindful of that. And lastly, be proactive and be creative. Different tasks will require different models, different approaches, and different techniques for even testing, developing, and evaluation, right? I'm often given like, hey, I have this super cool project that I want to launch tomorrow. Can you help me test it out? And I usually gonna say, I will help you, but not by tomorrow, because I need to think about what can go wrong into the specific experience, right? And oftentimes that is different from other things. We really have to think about that. And with that, I'm gonna end it here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pedro. That was really, really tactical. And it was so helpful because there's so much real world advice that we got from that. So I encourage folks, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat, and then I will be a little bit of a moderator. Just to kick it off, I want to start with a question. And Rebecca, it looks like you're here, so feel free to add more context to this question if you want. But this question is, how do you balance the need for getting informed consent from users with the potential for information overload? Rebecca, feel free to share more context or it's fine.
Okay, I can try to tackle
Looks
it.
like
Go ahead.
Rebecca might be trying to unmute herself. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, I was sorry, but yeah, but go ahead because we seem pretty limited on time. It was mainly around design research. So when you're working with people, there's a lot of information to take on board and really think about for people to really make a decision. Yeah, so it can feel like it slows things down.
Yeah, Rebecca, that's a really good question. I tend to bias on the transparency side of things. I think I've seen like a cool application that came out recently of scaling up mental health via these tools, right? And I think that only works because right at the beginning, you already know what's happening. Like, hey, I know this is not a person, but it can help me to a certain extent. So the privacy piece here is also about, transparency with the users, whether they know or not that what you're doing is not like it's AI generated, and understanding like there are processes to go beyond that. Like, oh, I can actually like maybe if I don't like this experience, I can file a ticket and that's going to get to a person that's going to read it. The privacy piece of it, that is also a challenge that we always see in the, I work in this inclusive AI space where if I knew everything about my users, I could probably give them a better experience. Do they want to tell me everything? Probably not. Do I want to know everything? Probably not. But there is always that tension, right, between privacy and personalization to a certain extent. And I'll be honest with you, I don't have a fleshed out answer. That's a line that we really walk on a per application scenario, because, some things you just should know about people, even if you think you would provide a better experience sometimes.
Great, thank you. So Lauren has a question here. Can you share an example? It's fine to anonymize it, of a time where someone came to you with a model they built and you helped them improve it. Tell us your process for evaluating the model and what recommendations you ended up making.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me try to think about that. I think there was one, yeah, there was an interesting one that came to light a few months ago where it was a project about generating some text about some pictures. And that person came to talk to me, to the team, and the question was basically like, hey, here's all the testing I've done. Can I put this, can I actually do you think this is safe enough to put it out there? And it's always funny because it's like, I don't have a stamp of like, this is great, put it out there, let's see how it goes. And people really want that, and it's just not how it works. So one of the things I did was almost like a red teaming approach of like, how could this go wrong? And if the input on this case is only images, what kind of images could I put on this that would basically generate harmful things? So I'm always trying to think from that lens of who would be the people that could be mostly negatively impacted by this experience, right? And I'm going to be honest with you, none of these projects, none of these things that we ended up working on, no one is coming with bad intent, right? Most of the time, like all the time, people have like really good intentions, and sometimes it's actually building positive things out there. But you really need to think from the lens of like who'd be really poorly impacted about it. So on this one specifically, I did find a lot of images that were generating questionable text. as the output. And that actually took them back into the drawing board, and they did some work on improving some prompt engineering, actually. So it was kind of quick iteration. And they've got rid of it. And they also limited a little bit of the exposure, right? A lot of times it's like, I can just open this up into the whole, like whatever corpus you have. Maybe you can start small, right? Start with your MVP, start on talent, and you know it's a little bit safer, a little bit self-contained. With time, you can expand it as you build more capabilities. That's usually the process we take about this. And the second one that can never be forgotten, look at your performance metrics, right? Like, what is the actual target metric you're trying to improve? Is this experience improving that or not? And if not, why? And that why can be a myriad of answers to that, but that's usually the process we take.
Great, thank you. Next question is from Scott. So most discussions around ethics are about the use of the tools. What about the ethics of the design, creation, and training? Do you have any input on ways that people can and should consider those elements?
I do a little bit, but very limited. I actually am fortunate to work with a really good design team. Like we have a few designers that literally think about inclusion in everything we build. Which really helped me. Like, it's fascinating the amount of times I'm like, I haven't thought about that before, and I'm learning something new just being in the room with a lot of these folks. So I actually had a conversation, really interesting conversation last week with someone that we had built a tool to help a certain part of the population that's often underserved. And we had built this amazing thing, and we're really proud of it. And then when we shared a little bit broadly, we got a feedback like, hey, how does this work for people that have difficulty reading? So they need to have some accessibility needs. And we're like, oh, actually, maybe we haven't thought about that. Let's take a look. And it was actually a pretty poor experience, which led to good work into like, we should make this better. So often these questions go back almost to my previous answer, which is like, what are the people that maybe don't have a great experience on this and why, right? And again, I think this group is a really good group of people that have those thoughts into like, how does this affect minorities? How does this affect people that, it doesn't, like, you don't have to be my neighbor. Maybe I'm building something and someone in the other side of the world is going to be using. How does that affect their experience on this application? That's often how we think about it. But I'm pretty sure that wasn't a great answer because I have the honor of working with great designers that have thought about this much more than I have.
Thank you. And that's an answer too, right? You just need to find really good designers that are also very principled thinking about this.
Yes.
Another question is from Brianna. How do you think the guardrails should be different between prototyping versus production?
Oh, that's a good one. I think on prototyping, you have a lot more freedom for things to go awry, right? Like you can try a lot more things. It's kind of like sandboxing, right? You can really try a bunch of different things here. Things can go wrong, and that's perfectly fine. I think the guardrails for prototyping have to be often based on your principles, right? So like if you like, why do I want to build something that's going to be basically revealing private information for my users that I shouldn't know to begin with? Like, so that's, for example, something you should not even do in prototyping, right? And honestly, you can actually build a lot of these things unintentionally. But when you go into production, I think the stakes are much higher, right? Because in production, you really need to think about some cases that are really out of the box. So to me, every time, if I'm building something new, the first thing I think about is how can I limit the amount of exposure this is going to have in terms of what can cause if you're using these generic experiences, right? If you think about normal, like traditional machine learning models, it often comes down to data, right? Like when you look at your data for any model you're building, how balanced is it in terms of some of the sensitive attributes? Again, to the extent that you can know, how balanced is it? We often have the same machine learning, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if your data is bad, you cannot expect to just have a great tool, a great machine learning model out of that, right? So there's often a little bit of wiggle room you can do on the data side to make things better from the get-go already.
Got it. Great, thank you. And then let's see.
I can jump been
Okay, cool. Laura, go
actually, if you're
ahead.
happy with that, instead of making you read it. Yeah. Yeah. And I know, I know how much time you spend staying up on the research around all of this. And so would love to hear, maybe for those who want to do some more reading on this, what are some of your favorite papers and why?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have a few different ones that have come out last year. I can probably share with you so you can share with the group. And a lot of them helped inform this talk on potential harms we have. And they were some of my favorite papers because they really help you think outside of that box, right? A lot of these things that I've seen I didn't come up with it. I'm basically like, I'm reading this, I'm like, this is really interesting, and I didn't even think that it could cause this type of harm, right? And I'm pretty sure that whoever is building these models is not thinking about that, right? They don't want the model to be generating like biased things and racist things. That's not the goal, right? So there has been a lot of research around this area of basically trying to break these models. And it's just sad that sometimes it happens and you actually see it out there. But I think it's a necessary part of the process, right? And like one of the things that we see is when the car was created, there was a lot of confusion about it, right? Because while we have this machine, it's really fast, it's going to kill people, it's not safe, it's metal, but we adapt it, right? And we will adapt to this the same way, but we need to create guardrails, we need to create the seat belts, we need to create the stop signs. So to me, I'm really interested into that space, right? On understanding like, okay, what are the things that can go wrong and how can we fix them as we go by it? And that really varies like between, do I have full ownership of this model to do all the fine tuning I wanted in my life? Or I don't have the budget. I can work on the prompt side of it, and that's might be okay for now.
Awesome. At least for me, that was a really good analogy that I really liked to close on. So we're going to go over shift into the small group discussions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and then share my screen. So give me a moment to do that.